Hello and welcome to the viewers of this video. This is the Orange Fan here, bringing you another entry for the episode Recap and Thoughts category. This video will be dedicated to episode 11 of Young Justice, Terrors. We begin this episode in New Orleans on September 14th, where Cat Grant reports Superman and Martian Manhunter working together to take on the Terror Twins, Tommy and Tuppence. The two Justice League members succeed in defeating the Terror Twins. They knock them into a warehouse where Aqualad and Red Tornado are waiting, and they place collars around their necks that neutralize their meta abilities, in this case, super strength. They then see Superboy, who's impersonating Tommy, and actually he does a very good job at imitating or impersonating Tommy Terror. Miss Martian makes contact with Tuppence, and this allows her to easily memorize Tuppence's appearance so she can assume Tuppence's form, which confuses both of the Terror Twins. Batman then places collars around the imposter Terror Twins' necks and explains to the real Terror Twins that they're under arrest. We then cut to September 16th, where the imposter Terror Twins, Icicle Jr. and Mr. Freeze are being taken to Belle Reve Penitentiary. Miss Martian recalls how she and Superboy ended up on this particular mission. So we get a flashback where Batman is talking to Superboy, Miss Martian, Aqualad, and Red Tornado and Superman are also present. Batman references the ice-themed villains that all attacked on the 4th of July, which happened in the first episode, Independence Day. He explains that it was no mere coincidence that 4 ice-themed villains made simultaneous attacks that day, and their apprehension was easier than expected. Captain Cold and Killer Frost were sent to Belle Reve Penitentiary, a prison that's meant to hold superpowered criminals. Mr. Freeze was sent to Arkham Asylum, while Icicle Jr., who's only 17 years old, was sent to Juvie. Mr. Freeze petitioned to the court to be held legally sane, and Icicle Jr. sued the court to be tried as an adult. So now they're both being sent to Belle Reve Penitentiary. And Batman says this seems to suggest that having all those ice-themed villains in Belle Reve Penitentiary was part of a plan of some kind. So Superboy and Miss Martian are supposed to impersonate the Terror Twins so they can go undercover and figure out what exactly the ice-themed villains are planning. He also answers Aqualad's question about who among the prison staff will know that the Terror Twins present are actually imposters who are undercover. Batman answers none of the prison staff will know about the truth because of the possibility of the prison staff being compromised. So then the flashback ends and they all arrive at Belle Reve Penitentiary. The warden, Amanda Waller, greets the 4 prisoners and explains that the collars around their necks are called inhibitor collars, and they have that name because they inhibit their meta abilities. And they're all specially designed for each individual prisoner. So the collar of Icicle Jr. was tailor-made for Icicle Jr., just to give you an example. They also mentioned that the walls are so strong, Belle Reve is very sturdy structure. The walls can hold Superman, and Amanda does clarify that, yes, they actually did check to make sure it could hold Superman. And no prisoner has ever escaped from Belle Reve, and she intends to keep it that way. She also introduces them to the psychiatrist of Belle Reve, Hugo Strange, whose intentions are to help to rehabilitate the prisoners. Belle Reve is also divided into a male wing and a female wing, And Miss Martian telepathically contacts Superboy to stay in contact with him, pointing out that the inhibitor collar she's wearing is meant to inhibit Tuppence Terror's abilities, so not Miss Martian's abilities. Although Superboy's super strength has been inhibited because that's something he shares in common with Tommy Terror. So Superboy is cellmates with Icicle Jr., while Miss Martian is cellmates with Killer Frost. The next, later on, it's all the prisoners are released into an opening area, the gym area, I presume. And it's a way where the male and the female wing are connected, but there's a big glass wall to prevent them from interacting with each other. Icicle Jr. is telling Superboy that who he thinks is Tommy Terror to stick around with him because he'll show him the ropes, saying that while he himself hasn't been incarcerated in Belle Reve beforehand, he has connections who already are in Belle Reve. More specifically, his father, Icicle Senior, is considered the top dog of the prisoners, we'll say. And Icicle Jr. ends up revealing that he has some issues with his father, which Superboy can relate to. So, while Icicle Jr. and Tommy are about to see Icicle Senior, who's with Mr. Freeze and Captain Cold, and they're both, they also have bodyguard prisoners, Blockbuster and Mammoth. Like, they shoo away the Riddler, who's voiced by Dave Franco, the younger brother of James Franco, because Riddler tries to talk to them, but they shoo him away because they have no interest in talking to him. But anyway, when Icicle Jr. and Superboy go to see Icicle Senior, Professor Oho starts a fight with Icicle Jr. Apparently, he's angry at him for some past conflict. When Superboy defends Junior, that leads to some of the other prisoners wanting to give Oho a free shot at who they think is Tommy Terror. And Oho, though, recognizes Superboy. He sees through the disguise. But fortunately, he's stopped from blowing Superboy's cover because Miss Martian, who's seeing this from the other side of the glass wall, compels him to forget. And Senior actually stops the fight because he's impressed by Tommy's abilities and says that it's the sort of thing that a father would like to see in his own son. Having said that, though, he doesn't wish to see Tommy right at the moment. He just wants to talk to Icicle Jr. and Captain Cold and Mr. Freeze. And Killer Frost, from the other side of the glass wall, she walks towards where they are so they can all be in generally the same area. But Superboy still has his super hearing in effect. The inhibitor collar didn't inhibit his super hearing, so he's able to listen in on their conversation. And the plan with the ice-themed villains all being there is they're planning a big jailbreak to free all the prisoners in Belle Reve. Later on, we see the prisoners are getting their new orange jumpsuits. And Professor Ivo is actually the one handing out the suits for the male prisoners. Icicle Jr. strongly suggests to Superboy that he put on the new outfit sooner rather than later. So Superboy telepathically contacts Miss Martian to let her know that means that the planned breakout is going to happen sooner rather than later. And Miss Martian relays this message to Aqualad, who is... he and Red Tornado are just outside of Belle Reve, but they're in the bio ship, and it's in camouflage mode. So they're there to help out just in case they need to help out. Afterwards, the imposter Terror Twins are in a session with Doctor Strange, and Miss Martian sees this as a chance to help Superboy regarding his father issues with Superman, but Superboy does not want to talk about it. But Hugo Strange is pretty chill about the whole thing. He thinks they've made some progress, at least, by the end of the session. So later on still, they're all eating in the mess hall, and Icicle Senior and the other ice-themed villains that are with him, they listen to the news to make sure that all the Justice League members are occupied, and from what they were able to gather, Red Tornado is the only one that's unaccounted for. But Icicle Senior thinks this isn't an issue because one Justice League member won't be able to stop all the prisoners in Belle Reve. So he thinks that they can still proceed with their plans. And Icicle Jr. sits with Superboy. He says that he doesn't sit with his dad because his dad only wants him around when he needs him for something. But Icicle Jr. also says he's not exactly trying to get his dad's approval, something that Superboy doesn't share sentiments with. And he instead questions about Tuppence because Icicle Jr. seems to be attracted to Tuppence Terror. Though Superboy is still frustrated about what happened in the therapy session with Hugo Strange, but Icicle Jr. just thinks, oh, your family, you wouldn't see what makes her special. But Icicle Jr.'s words actually seem to make Superboy consider something. Soon enough, though, it seems like Mr. Freeze is trying to usurp Icicle Senior as the top dog prisoner, and this gets him sent to Amanda Waller's office. But this was actually a ruse. Oh, that's right, I forgot to mention that. Before the mess hall scene, some new delivery came in, and the delivery was actually smuggled ice equipment for the villains who don't have natural ice powers, like Mr. Freeze. So what happens is Mr. Freeze was able to sneak the equipment onto him so he could freeze the security guard's weapons, and he was able to freeze his collar to get rid of it, and he was able to hold Amanda Waller and Hugo Strange and the rest of the prison staff hostage, and he turns off the collars so that all the prisoners can use their meta abilities again. And we see exactly what their plan is to break out of Belle Reve. The ice-themed villains will use their ice powers to weaken the walls, while the super strong villains, such as Blockbuster and Mammoth, will break down the weakened walls. And Mr. Freeze suspects that it'll take them 10 minutes to break out of Belle Reve. Oh, and as for the female wing, what happens is the laundry room, actually, the wall in the laundry room connects the male wing with the female wing. So Killer Frost will use her powers on that particular wall. And then Devastation, a female villain with super strength, will break down the weakened walls that Killer Frost used her ice powers on. So they'll break into the male wing to join the rest of so the female prisoners will join the male prisoners when they all break out of Belle Reve. That's their intended plan. And unfortunately, Miss Martian's cover is blown when she saves one of the prison staff. She saves one of the prison staff from being eliminated by Killer Frost, and Superboy loses connection. He loses telepathic connection with Miss Martian. And okay, yeah, that's right. When Superboy and Icicle Jr. go to the laundry room so they can freeze their end of the wall and break it down so that Killer Frost and the female prisoners can come over to the male wing so they can all escape, Superboy has to figure out a plan to stop the Belle Reve breakout, but he also acknowledges that he can't beat all of the prisoners by himself. So he comes up with a plan. Earlier on, he tricked the villains into thinking that he has a psychic or telepathic link with his twin sister, and saying that him and Tuppence not advertising that ability is how they were able to avoid the inhibitor collars from affecting them about that. So going along with that lie, Superboy says that that Tuppence says that the collars are being activated in the female wing, so they need to make sure that they're turned. So they need to make sure they don't turn back on the male wing. And while Icicle Jr. wants to warn his dad about this, Superboy tricks him into saying, "No, take the initiative yourself. That'll make your dad proud." And while Icicle Jr. isn't looking for his dad's approval, he still decides to go through with Superboy's idea. They stop the criminals that are guarding Amanda Waller's office, thinking that because they don't have time to argue is Superboy's justification, so they can get the collars to make sure the collars are turned off again, but really he turns them back on. And when Senior goes to confront Amanda Waller about this, Hugo Strange stops Senior from attacking Amanda Waller and knocking him out. But Mr. Freeze, Mammoth, and Blockbuster all go to confront Icicle Jr. and Superboy because Mr. Freeze pieces together that they were responsible for turning on the collars again. But Junior says, "We turned them off, you should be thanking us." But Superboy tricks Junior into thinking Mr. Freeze's plan to usurp Icicle Senior as the top dog was real, and this is part of that. So he manages to pit the two against each other. And eventually, Superboy takes care of Mr. Freeze while Icicle Jr. takes care of Mammoth and Blockbuster. When Superboy breaks over to the female wing, he takes care of Killer Frost and Devastation, and Icicle Jr. can sympathize with him when he sees Miss Martian is frozen in a block of ice. And Superboy telepathically tries to plead to her to regain consciousness, and she breaks free, and because it's pretty cold on Mars, but she doesn't get the chance to really say much when Superboy kisses her. But because they both look like the Terror Twins at this moment, Icicle Jr. is understandably unsettled by this. But then Miss Martian returns back to her usual appearance that we, the audience, have seen. And then Icicle Jr. pieces together that he's been tricked, and he realizes his dad won't be happy about this. Later on, we find out that Amanda Waller is no longer the warden of Belle Reve. Hugo Strange is the warden now, and he's talking to Icicle Senior, and they're both being very friendly with each other. It turns out Hugo Strange was in on the plan. He was the one who smuggled the ice equipment into Belle Reve for them, and only the Riddler managed to escape Belle Reve. And while Icicle Senior is bummed out that they weren't able to escape, he still takes it in stride since the main objectives were fulfilled, getting Hugo Strange into the position of warden, because Icicle Senior and Hugo Strange are revealed to be affiliated with the Light, and that's how we end the episode. Now, this episode gave the spotlight to two characters, the two members of the Young Justice team that have alien DNA, Superboy and Miss Martian. And this episode was a big moment because this is where the two actually the two become a couple by the end of this episode. And many fans refer to this couple as the Super Martian couple. And yeah, it was pretty funny how Superboy ended up realizing how much Miss Martian meant to him because of Icicle Jr. And I actually liked Icicle Jr. He was a pretty fun villain, and yeah, it was pretty fun to see his friendship with Superboy, even though he thought he was Tommy Terror. It's kind of like, it kind of does make him a little more human, even though he's a criminal. And it was pretty cool. We got to meet his dad, Icicle Senior, too. So we got to see the idea of families, even with villains. Because even villains have their families. And yeah, it was a nice parallel with how Superboy has his father issues with Superman. Junior isn't actually looking for Senior's approval, while Superboy wants Superman's approval. Otherwise, this was a good example of them following up on something that they mentioned beforehand, namely the very first episode with the ice-themed villains, and they came back to that here in this episode. And we do see that, yes, this is part of the Lights' plan, but once again, this is also an example where the Lights still managed to gain a victory, even if all of their objectives aren't met. Like, while they couldn't break out all the prisoners, their main priority was to get Hugo Strange, one of their agents, into the position of Warden of Belle Reve, and that's obviously going to cause a lot of trouble. And we'll see how that happens in the future. Otherwise, this episode also introduced us to the Terror Twins. They're actually characters that were created specifically for the Young Justice TV series. I believe the reason they said was because they wanted to add more teenaged villains to match with the teenaged Young Justice team. Although, funny enough, the Terror Twins' first appearance within the Young Justice universe, so Earth 16, was actually in the tie-in comics, issue 0 to be more specific. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, I like the Terror Twins. I thought they were interesting villains, like twin sibling villains, and yeah, it's nice to have more villains that are kind of peers of the young heroes too. So I got a good kick out of that. And otherwise, let's see. Yeah, we did get to see a lot of the other previous villains appear in this episode. And it also mentions how certain things happen, like off screen or not even in the tie-in comics. Like Professor Ivo escaped at the end of school, but he ended up returning here, and he was in prison by the time of this episode. So the Justice League did manage to eventually capture Professor Ivo. And otherwise, yeah, that was pretty much about it, really. But yeah, a good episode that I felt followed up on some previous plot lines, and they came back in a more prevalent role. Nice callbacks to previous villains, and once again, we see more and more how the Lights' influence is in many areas, and the danger that influence can present. And Superboy and Miss Martian have come a long way since their rocky beginnings, like in what happened in Welcome to Happy Harbor. And funny enough, the next episode is also going to be a spotlight episode for two members of the Young Justice team, like this episode. And like this episode, the two members that are going to share a spotlight together, they share something in common too, like how Superboy and Miss Martian both have alien DNA. The next two characters who share the spotlight will share something in common, and we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But there you go. That's we've discussed episode 11 of Young Justice on this channel. Take care, and until next time.